Well, as we come to verse 8 in our reading, I'm really struck by what Paul has to say here, where he says of Jesus that being found in appearance as a man, and he doesn't mean appearance that he just looked like a man, but he was actually literally in substance, had human flesh like you and I. What was his response? Did he look in the mirror and say, man, I'm good looking? You know, I think we always portray Jesus in pictures as being this really quite handsome guy that would have walked in the room, everybody would have said, wow, what a stud. But it says basically, there was in Isaiah 53, he says there was nothing about his appearance that we would desire him. Jesus wasn't particularly good looking. In fact, he was probably pretty ordinary looking, and he looked like everybody else in the room, and nobody would have even noticed him until he began to speak and he began to teach. And that's when they realized that he was different. The end of Matthew 17, or chapter 7, where he says that he spoke with authority, that exousia, that power of God, when he spoke, that people were just grabbed by his message. So being found in the appearance of man, he didn't look at himself and say, man, what a good looking rapper, but rather it said he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even to death on the cross. Jesus instantaneously knew whatever moment he came to complete awareness, it may have been at conception or it may have been at some point early in his life, that he recognized who he was. We're given no real information when the divine epiphany manifests itself in his understanding. But the whole point was that he was humbled when he saw the wrapper he was in. He didn't take great pride in it. He didn't seek to improve it. He didn't work on making himself look better, more handsome, more attractive. He didn't go out and start bodybuilding or any of those other things. He just simply embraced who God had chosen to make him, the body that God had put in him. Because later on in Hebrews says, a body you have prepared for me. He realized that the body was not designed for anything other than being a sacrifice. It was a vehicle to get him from Bethlehem to Calvary. And so he just embraced that body that he was put into as if it was even an entombment, because he said he knew that the ultimate end was to be obedient up to the point of death itself, even the death on the cross. And, you know, I've talked about this many times, but death on the cross is the lowliest of death, the most horrible of all deaths that you could experience. Many people believe it is the most torturous way you can kill somebody, because unlike Jesus, many times people lingered on the cross for days and even weeks before they finally expired. It just was horrific, and it was designed to be so horrific because it was to terrify people. Break the law, come against Rome, and this is what we'll do to you. So it was a very effective way. That's why I even say when Jesus in Matthew 16:24 says, if any man will come after me and deny himself and pick up the cross and follow me, that whole phrase of pick up your cross was not lost on his disciples. Every one of them was familiar with somebody that they had personally seen hanging from a cross, because that happened quite frequently in Jerusalem. So the whole point was, there was no mystery in what he was saying to them. If there was confusion, it was because they preferred to be confused rather than to have clarity. But he goes on, I think Paul goes on in verses 9 and 10 to say the following, that therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Now here's an interesting thing. What is the consequence of humbling yourself? Well, Jesus sets this example, that because he humbled himself, God exalted him above every name that's mentioned in heaven and earth. And he tells us that one day when Christ appears, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that he is the Lord, to the glory of the Father. That includes people who have rejected him. And it's going to be a shameful moment for them, a moment of great terror, when Christ appears in the heavenlies, and those who have rebelled and rejected his truth, they'll fall down and admit whether they want to or not. Even those who die before his coming and they go up to the great light in heaven, when they get there, if they have rejected Christ, they're going to be humbled. They're going to see him for who he is, and they're going to be without excuse. When I hear people say, well, I'll explain my case, I'll explain my unique dynamics when I get to heaven. You have no unique dynamics. There's no explanation. You had an opportunity to believe. You chose not to believe. And now what's left for you is a Christless eternity. And we can spend a lot of time talking and debating about what exactly is hell and the afterlife without Christ like. But the bottom line is Jesus portrays a very unattractive place described with wailing and gnashing of teeth and everlasting torment. That in itself should scare everybody right into heaven. But the whole point is we're being told that that's too negative. Let's not talk about it. I think the discouragement for talking about hell comes right out of hell, because hell doesn't want the world to know, doesn't want mankind to know what's awaiting them. But what we also need to realize is the reward that comes from having believed in him, that we will experience the glorification of God. Just as Jesus, who was a firstborn of many brethren, he became the role model and that which we follow after when we leave this world and go into the heavenly presence. One of the greatest things that I think about heaven is the fact that there's no regret. In this life, if you live long enough, you will look back on your life and you will regret so many things. And the sad thing is you can't change any of those things. Now you can learn from them, you just can't undo them. And you may be able to be apologetic to people and confessional to people, and they maybe forgive you, and you maybe can develop a whole new healthy relationship, but you can't undo what you did. And that's where even when people think, well, I'll just start doing good from this point forward, or even some people come to Christ and think from now, if I'm going to stay saved, I got to keep on doing good things going forward. It doesn't work, because we still are burdened with that sinful nature. We have this body that we inhabit that has a fallen nature, and we're tempted. And even though Jesus never fell when he was tempted, we fall more often than not. We sin in thought, we sin in word, we sin in deed. But we also know that as we bow our knee now to Christ, and we confess now that he is the Lord above all, that we also know that we'll be glorified with him. As Paul said, if we suffer with him, we will also be glorified with him. And that's suffering for him isn't something that fits into a certain category. Or basically, the minute you decide that I'm going to deny myself and pick up my cross and follow him, from that point on, I experience the suffering of denial. And I will suffer because I'm seeking to be godly. Paul said anybody who does that will be persecuted. So the whole idea of this is so important to grasp, that the path to Christ's fulfillment in your life is not in accomplishment, it's in humility. It's not in striving to make your mark in the world, but rather striving to let Christ leave his mark in the world through you in some small or big way. As the old adage or poems used to read, it says, one life will soon be past, but only that which is done for Christ will last. And that becomes the really pressing question. Am I doing it for Christ, or am I doing it for self? Well, I'm going to stop here, not only because I probably don't have anything else to say, but I have to be someplace else to take care of some other things. And so I thank you for taking your time, and I'll let you get about your business as well. God bless you, and go in his wondrous grace.